Time now for the nationally syndicated radio show, The World of Laurie Zoock. And now, here she is, the smart, the sexy, the savvy, divine Miss C.
And welcome to my world, the world of Laurie Zoock. I just love doing the show, and being a musician, I love to interview musicians, especially really well-known ones, and we're doing another Masters and Legends music special today. And I've got a great saxophonist, Ron APREA. Welcome to the show, Ron.
Thank you, Laurie. Good to be here.
Well, I want to talk about your life, and, we're going to kind of do a profile on you, and for our listeners, we're going to play some of your music. We're going to play in between. You'll hear some of Ron's music. But Ron, what made you, I like to ask this to every musician, what made you want to become a musician?
People ask me that all the time, and I try to trace that back, and I think there are a couple of things that inspired me to play an instrument, and one of them was my mom taking me to these live shows at the time. When I was a kid, they had the Roxy Theater and the Paramount Theater. They had these live stage shows between movies, and my mom would take me to these things. She loved music, and she was a decent singer herself. So she would take me as a kid. I was probably 6 years old at the time, I guess. And I was so impressed. I can still see Louis Prima's big band up there, on the stage playing, and I'm thinking, wow, that's the excitement, the electricity. I'm thinking, boy, would I love to do that. That was one of the things. And then there was another part. I think I was raised in an area of Astoria, a kind of a integrated area, and behind my house was a Baptist church. And right, maybe 40 or 50 feet from my kitchen window was the church. And in the summertime, my window would be open, and of course their windows were open in the church, and the choir would be singing all day long on Sunday. And I would sit by the window, basically getting goosebumps listening to this great choir, jazz influenced singing and just good music. So those are the two things that stick out in my mind as inspiring me to want to do it,
Yeah, it's interesting when I, speak to different musicians. Everyone almost says the same thing. It was as if they knew. There was something that gave them chills. They just knew that was something that they wanted to be involved in. Do you play other instruments other than saxophone?
Oh, yeah. I played the saxophone, clarinet, flute. And I'm a very weak piano player. And I played piano basically to help me with my writing, my arranging and composing and stuff like that, and, just being able to hear chords. But, I do play the doubles. I never got into a double reed, but I do play, the three important woodwinds, which is the saxophone, clarinet, and flute. I also play, of course, the alto, tenor, baritone, soprano.
Now, how old were you when you actually started playing? What did you start on? Which instrument?
Okay, this is a funny story. I cringe sometimes when I tell a story, but we used to watch. My family was in love with the Lawrence Welk show, and I almost hate to say that too. But the part of that show that I always loved was when Pete Fountain would come out. He was always featured with the Lawrence Welk Orchestra, and Pete was a wonderful jazz clarinet player, and I thought, wow, I'd love to play that instrument. He just knocked me out. I don't know. I was probably maybe 8 or 10 years old at the time, something like that. And that kind of, hit me as the instrument that I'd like to play. And I thought it was, believe it or not, I thought it was called a saxophone. So when my music teacher in middle school asked me asked the class basically if they wanted they had some instruments that they were renting, and they had some saxophones and trumpets, trombones, and so forth. And I thought, saxophone, Pete Fountain.
Wow, yeah, that was your inspiration.
So I raised my hand, and he took me after class. He took me into another room, and he starts pulling all these big cases out of the closet, and I'm thinking, like, where's the saxophone? And he was pulling saxophones out, So too embarrassed to tell him that I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I took the saxophone home, and it was actually a C melody saxophone. They used them in parades in them days. I don't even think they make them anymore. But I was playing a C melody saxophone, and I wasn't crazy about it, but I wanted to play music, so I took some lessons, and I eventually got into the band, and I sat next to an amazing alto player. When I heard the sound of the alto saxophone, that at that moment I decided that was the instrument that I wanted to play.
Now, I just have to share, because you made me kind of laugh hysterically back here. I actually have a C melody. I have a con C melody, and it's my favorite horn. But most people have no clue what it is, because I think they were used as military horns back in the 1920s.
Yeah, I don't know. I was told that they used them a lot in parades, but I know very little about why they ever made a horn like that. It was kind of an in-between horn that had a very kind of a weird sound. It didn't sound like an alto or a tenor. It was
in between. Yeah, it was totally different. It was totally different. Well, so you started in school. Now, did you have primarily school for your musical training? Did you go on in education for music? Did you just play so well you didn't need any additional, training?
I've had a string of great teachers. From the beginning, I always believed that a good teacher was really important. I started with a guy named Ted Grant, who used to do shows at Radio City, and his studio was right across the street from Radio City, and that was my first private lesson. And I studied with him for a couple of years, and then a friend of mine at school said, you have to check out Bobby Tricarico. Bobby Tricarico was a tenor player who had just gotten off the road with Ray Anthony's band, and also did some touring with what's his name? Anyway, Louis Prima's band.
Okay.
So Bobby was teaching, and he lived in Astoria, not too far from where I lived. And I went down and visited Bobby, and I was knocked out with not only his playing, but what a nice guy he was, and what a great teacher he was. And he had a ton of good saxophone players studying with him, and it was turning out one killer player after another. So Bobby was the guy. I studied with Bobby for many years, and he became almost like my father. I mean, I got very close to Bobby. He became a great friend and mentor. And then following him, I remember studying clarinet with a guy named Leon Rushinoff, great teacher, and Harold Bennett. I studied flute with him. And then later I paid a visit to Phil Woods and picked his brain a little bit, Lee Konitz and Frank Foster. So I always had like really great teachers around me and helping me with my stuff,
All right. Now, how old were you when you started playing professionally? How did that happen?
Well, I don't know how it happened. It just seems to happen. You're playing in rehearsal bands, and I had my own rehearsal band, and then I met Frank Foster, and Frank Foster became a lifelong friend of mine, and picked up where Bobby left off. Became my mentor and almost like my dad as well. He was with Basie's band, and he was a great arranger. And he took me under his wing. I met him at Birdland, and we became great friends. And he would invite me up his house and just share his music with me. And I was pretty surprised because I had a rehearsal band, and I asked Frank if he had any old arrangements that he might want to contribute to my rehearsal band. And never expecting him to lay all his new scores on me. I mean, he just started, dumping all his music on me, and I would go home and copy them and bring the score back, and then he would give me another couple, and I would copy those, and I wound up with almost every piece of music that Frank ever wrote. So, because of having such strong music and all those basic classics, it attracted all the good players in New York. So I'm kind of going around the horn here, but being around all these wonderful players leads to work, and you're playing with New York's finest players, and that leads to gigs. And before I know it, the baritone player Richie Bars asks me if I want to do a tour with Les Elgart. So that's how I got into the business. Basically, it started with my own band, and then Frank Foster contributing his music to my band, meeting great players, and then going from there. And before I knew it, I was touring with a whole bunch of bands.
Right. So it sounds like you had a group. You were talented. You had a group of talented people, and then a lot of it from there were the connections.
Yeah.
Okay. So getting established as a professional kind of came through that network. But let's talk about who were some of the people that inspired you musically. I know you had your teachers, but were there other people that inspired you musically?
Yeah, I was back in the '60s. Well, I think originally Johnny Hodges was the guy with Duke Ellington's band. I just love Johnny Hodges playing, and I have all those Duke Ellington albums, and he was the guy for me during that period. That was back in late '50s, early '60s. And but I guess later on in the '60s, I fell in love with Coltrane's playing, and I started leaning more toward the outside high energy style that was happening back in the '60s. And I was listening a lot to Jackie McLean and Eric Dolphy, and of course Charlie Parker. Charlie Mariano and Phil Woods were some of the other alto players that I really liked. But in the '60s, I was really consumed with high energy playing. And I was listening a lot to Coltrane, which was a little odd because I'm an alto player, and I was listening to all these albums by this great tenor player. But I just was totally knocked out with that whole concept. And of course, Frank Foster, who was kind of on the same the same track with Coltrane. I did a lot of playing with Frank and Frank's big band, and Frank Foster's big band was one of the few big bands that was doing that kind of playing. It was pretty high energy, and he would open things up and would open the arrangements up and let everybody blow, and it got pretty crazy. I mean, he had Elvin Jones on drums and Major Holly on bass and all these guys, and it just, I mean, it was just. So it was the only big band I ever played with that was playing outside music,
Yeah. When you're playing with a group of musicians in a band, and you have a lot of people get up to do their solos, is it more of a team? Do you feel it's more of a team type concept, or is it more, is it more ego related?
I hope it's a team kind of thing. When I'm playing, I'm careful about who I surround myself with. Of course, if I'm hired for a gig, I have no choice over who the people are. When I'm putting my music, my bands together, I try to pick the people that are on the same frequency as I am, and I try to pick people that we can have a musical conversation with. The style of music that I play requires that, and if we're not all in tune, if we're not playing and bouncing off each other and feeding off each other, picking up a rhythm pattern, for example, that the drum might be playing, or an extended chord that the piano player jumps on, and you have these little musical conversations. If that's not happening, well, then for me, it's not working.
Right, gotcha. Now we're gonna play an audio clip, and then when we come back from hearing the clip, I want you to talk a little bit about it. Here we go. Now, Ron, that's so beautiful. Jeff and I are here in the studio going, wow, we don't want to turn it off. So tell us a little bit about that audio clip.
Okay, well, that, of course, is Gordon Jenkins' Goodbye. And that was recorded for my friend Frank Foster, who passed away a few years back. And I had written that arrangement to play at his memorial service, but I was out of town, when that service happened. So I thought, what? I think I'm going to record this and dedicate it to Frank Foster. So that's what that was. That's what that recording is about. It's dedicated to my lifelong, my 5-decade pal and mentor, Frank Foster.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's very emotional. You can just hear it in your playing. So I can hear the importance, I guess, is what I'm trying to say of that music. Talk a little bit about, some of the people you performed with, and where have you performed, and have you traveled?
You mean some of the bands that I played with and stuff like that?
Yep.
Oh well, Lionel Hampton. I joined Lionel Hampton's band in 1969 when it was a small band. It was just three horns, alto, tenor, and trumpet. And I played with Hamp's band. I did bunches of tours with his band from '69 through around '74. I'm trying to think about, even prior to that, a couple of years before that, I did some touring with Woody Herman's band. I was basically just filling in with that band. They were in transition, and that great band with Sal Mystico and Jay Canner and Bill Chase and all those guys. That band was in transition, and they were stuck for a couple of tenor plays. So Eddie Daniels and I flew down to Baltimore and joined Woody's band, and I stayed on the band for a couple of months until they were able to fill that chair. So I played with that band. I toured with other bands, Elgart's band. I played lead alto with Les's band, and Billy May, Buddy Rich, Buddy Morrow, and Tito Puente's band. I loved playing with Tito Puente's band. So, Skitch Henderson, whatever. I was bouncing from band to band for quite a few years, and then I did a tour with a gospel, small big band with two saxophones, a couple of trombones, and three trumpets, and a choir. And Nat Adderley was hired to join. He joined and toured with us, and it was a big kick for me touring and playing with Nat Adderley, who was a great guy. He was just a sweetheart of a person, and I got to play with him at the Apollo Theater. One of the highlights of my life was playing with Nat at the Apollo Theater. We did his famous tune, Work Song, and I played Cannonball's part on that, and it was just such a kick, working with Nat. But those are some of the people I've played with. I've done some Broadway stuff. I did a show called Song of Singapore. It was an off-Broadway show that was really cool. A lot of good players. Earl May was playing bass, and Oliver Jackson was on drums. It was a very strong musical. So those are some of the things I've done.
Yeah, you're pretty diverse. It sounds like you've done a little bit of everything.
Yeah. I wasn't specializing. To just make a living playing jazz, I thought would be a little tough, and I thought playing the doubles. And Bobby Tricarico always ingrained that into me, that you really have to be versatile. And he prepared me with the flute and the clarinet. And of course, Bobby was one of the great studio players. Did a lot of movies. In fact, at one point, every movie that came out of California, Bobby was on there somewhere playing oboe or something, So Bobby kind of trained me to be versatile, so I was able to handle different things. I even wound up for a while doing subs on the circus.
That had to be really interesting.
It really was. You know what? It was a fun band, but better than it was a great band. I mean, all New York players had a lot of energy. But it was in January. In January,
freezing.
Pit, So I appreciated that gig, and I was trying to. I would take almost anything that came. I didn't do a whole lot of club dates. I was never into the club date scene. But I bounced around and toured with bands and did various gigs that made sense to me musically.
Yeah. Now you and we have a mutual friend, Glenn Zatola.
Yeah.
And yes, and Glenn asked me to send you his regards.
I love Glenn. I am a big fan of Glenn's. I got to tell you, he is such an amazing player.
He is. He's incredible. And now I ask every musician this question because this is something Glenn and I have discussed at length. But he always talks about musicians being able to speak or sing through their horn. I want to ask you, what does that mean to you?
Oh,
the loaded questions.
Speak to my horn. Well, I guess we all do it. If I could sing, I probably wouldn't be a saxophone player. so that's all I can say. My wife is a wonderful jazz vocalist, and so I get my vocal stuff through her, but. I try to express it. A lot of people, say it sounds like I'm speaking when I'm playing. I don't really know what that is. I know Charlie Mariano was asked that one time, and so they said to him, like, you have some kind of a sadness in your sound, and he said something like, yeah, he says, he says it's a little melancholy. He says I have no control over that. He says it's just there, and you know, when you're being honest and when you're playing from your heart, it comes through, you know.
And you just said something really key, because you know that I also teach music, and so the thing to me is the from the heart words that you just used, because there are you know, kids when they start playing, for example, they're not necessarily playing from the heart. Some of them are born with it, and the rest of them they have to try to learn it, and some will probably never learn it. But it's that feeling part. I think that you nailed it right there.
Yeah, well, you can't teach that part. You know, I have private students too, and some of them just come in here and it's there, and you know, it's stuff that you can't teach. Either you have a passion for music and you have a passion for expression,
right.
You know, or it's not going to, you know, you can't. The teacher can't put that there.
Right.
I mean, we can bring it out. We can help them develop it and get that passion into their playing. But if it's not there to begin with, I'm not sure there's anything we can do about that.
You're right. That's just playing the notes off the paper.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you've also worked with a lot of big names. You've worked with Billy Joel. You've mentioned Lionel Hampton. You've worked with Chick Corea. So maybe share a story.
No, I hate to do this to you, Laurie. I love you, but I never worked with Billy Joel.
Oh, okay. I thought I read it on your site. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. And what was the other one you mentioned? That
Chick Corea and Lionel Hampton?
Yeah, no. I worked with
them?
Of course, I worked with Lionel Hampton, but
Okay.
not Chick Corea.
Okay.
But Lionel Hampton. Well, as I told you before, I started playing with him in 1969, and we stayed friends up until the day he died. You know, he loved Angela and my son Matt. We used to go up his house, and in his later years, after he had suffered a couple of strokes, he wasn't very mobile, and he would spend most of his life basically sitting in his apartment, and he'd do an occasional gig, but for the most part, he'd be sitting around his apartment and watching TV or listening to music. So Angela and Matt and I we would go up to his house, and Angela found something that he really loved, which is peaches and cream cake. so she would bake these peaches and cream cakes, and we would go hang out with them and spend a day with them, and bring CDs up there and listen to music. And I remember after we did Angela's first album, we brought it up to his apartment and was sitting there listening to it, and he really liked it. I said, so what do you think, Hamp? I said, you want to do another one? I said, and you know, with Angela and my band. He said, yeah. And at that, as soon as he said yeah, and he was down for it, that's it. I went home. I started writing music, and I put an album together called Swinging with Legends, and it's my 16-piece band, of course, featuring Angela on vocals, and I had the guests. The legends were Lionel Hampton, Frank Foster, and Lou Tabakin. And it turned out to be an album that I'm so proud of. I produced a whole bunch of, probably 15 or 20 albums over the years, and that's still my favorite album of all, you know.
Now, that's the one that had 8 Grammy nominations?
Yeah. It got a bunch of, and in them days, there was no internet. That was back in '98. So it was really hard to interact with NARAS members, so it never really got a nomination, but it was entered in 8 different categories, and got a lot of attention, got a lot of radio play.
Yeah, that's very impressive. Well, I want you to stay with us. We're going to cut to a quick commercial break. Don't go anywhere.
Our highly competitive and hectic world is fraught with dishonesty and challenges. Critical decisions must be made on a daily basis with accuracy when substantial assets are at risk. When you are confronted with a decision point involving opportunity and risk, consult with Sharpline Investigations, statewide experts in due diligence, investigations, and litigation support. Sharpline's professionals work with clients to conduct interviews, deep background investigations and develop facts and intelligence related to litigation. When circumstances require confidential and expert fact-finding, turn to Sharpline Investigations, the statewide leaders in investigations and risk mitigation. Visit sharplineinvestigations.com or call 855-394-0042.
Do you suffer from back, neck, or body pain? Do you suffer from migraines or have jaw or face pain? Has conventional medicine failed you? Were you injured or in an accident? Call chiropractic physician Dr. Dan Maddock at 813-935-1664. Dr. Dan has helped thousands of patients gain relief for more than 30 years. Dr. Dan is caring, gentle, and takes his time with each patient. He's also a past president of the International Craniopathic Society, a special certification of only 300 chiropractors worldwide. Dr. Dan helps patients from the neck up and the neck down. Dr. Dan accepts most insurance plans. Don't continue to live in pain. Call 813-935-1664 today. That's 813-935-1664 and get on track to better health.
Are you looking for an affordable way to advertise to thousands of consumers nationally? If you own a business and didn't think you could afford radio advertising, you need to call me, Laurie Zoock, host of the nationally syndicated radio show, The World of Laurie Zoock. My show reaches thousands of people on 29 AM and FM stations nationwide, as well as through the internet. Additionally, your commercials will also be heard on my podcasts and throughout social media sites. Don't wait another minute. Call me at 813-777-4908, 813-777-4908, and let me bring your message to the nation and help you gain more exposure.
Hi, this is Laurie Zoock, radio host from The World of Laurie Zoock. I was so nervous about getting tattooed, but after doing my due diligence and checking out companies and artists, I had my tattoos done by Justin Dubois of Suncoast Tattoos. He is knowledgeable and artistic, and he gave me a beautiful tattoo, and he put me at ease before, during, and after the process. I just love my new tattoo. Go get your tattoo at Suncoast Tattoos. Call them at 727-575-7935 today. That's 727-575-7935. Or go to suncoasttattoos.net. Welcome back to the World of Laurie Zoock. Today we've been doing the Masters and Legends special, and my special guest is saxophonist Ron APREA. Let me say your last name correctly. And Ron, you mentioned a little bit earlier about your wife Angela De Niro, so I want to talk about that. How did you guys meet?
Okay, well, I was on tour with Skitch Henderson's band, and I was rooming with another saxophone player named Steve Greenfield. And when I come off that tour, I got hired to do a gig with a local band here on Long Island, a dance band. And I'm sitting in the saxophone section, and Angela's the singer with the band, and she's sitting right in front of my chair. And I'm talking with the saxophone player alongside of me, and he was asking me about the Skitch Henderson tour, and I mentioned that I was rooming with Steve Greenfield, and Angela turns around and says, "I know Steve Greenfield. We went to school together." So that's how the conversation with Angela started, and of course we introduced ourselves to each other, and we spent most of that night, between sets, hanging out and chatting, and that's how our relationship started. I wound up playing with that band for a while, and I wasn't crazy about the band, but I was crazy about Angela, so I stayed with the band.
That's a good story. So when you perform now, does she come out and sing with you?
We do a lot of work together. In fact, I would say over the past decade, most of my gigs are with Angela. Most of the gigs that I'm hired for, not the freelance gigs, but the gigs that I'm booked for are usually with her. We do We do. I don't know if I guess you're familiar with Johnny Dankworth and Cleo Lane. They do that alto voice thing. Well, we do a lot of that, and we were actually hired to do a festival in France, which was really cool. And they booked us to work with an amazing Parisian all-star 16-piece band. And I shipped my music over there, so the band was totally ready for us when we got there. And my son Matt, who's like 16 and was a studying violinist at the time, and playing really well. We brought him with us, and then we actually put him in the show. So it was kind of a kick. But most of my work has been with Angela.
All right, now you're talking about your son. So, this is interesting to me because here you've got the mother and father are both musicians. So talk a little bit about your son. Was he born into it?
Yeah, I think so. I hate to say it, but there was no way he was going to get.
He could escape, huh?
No escape. Angela, I remember Angela was doing shows. We were doing the Borscht Belt for a while. I had written a kind of a commercial, kind of a hip commercial show that we were doing the Catskill Mountains with, and she was 4 months pregnant at the time. So
he heard it. He heard it all the way back in the womb.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it started before he was born, actually. But but he decided he wanted to be a violinist. He started on piano, and he was a pretty amazing piano player. But his passion kind of changed midstream, and he thought, he wanted to play the violin. And kind of like me, they were offering violin lessons in school. In middle school, and he took a violin home and just fell in love with it, and he's become a pretty amazing violinist. And in fact, he graduated Eastman a few years back, and he's been doing pretty well around town. He's done a couple of movies, scores, and a couple of record dates. Mitch Froman, he did an album with saxophonist Mitch Froman, and he's done some studio stuff, and he's a strong player. And I'm thinking, I'm going to put him on this project and turn him loose, because now I want to hear people. I want him to play some solos, and get him out there. And he came through, and I think he sounded really, really pretty amazing on this project.
Yeah, and Eastman's a very prestigious school. Now, does he play? Is he classically trained, or is he playing jazz on the violin?
Well, he's classically trained, but he's not going to escape playing jazz.
It's a family thing. It sounds like here.
But when we put the string section together for this project, I told him, make sure you get string players that understand the jazz concept, and he did, and the string section was pretty amazing, and they knew the exact feel that I wanted to play with, and they nailed it, I think.
Now, I understand that you recorded with a band at the Smithsonian, and your recordings were archived there?
Yeah. When I was touring with HAMP, the Smithsonian Institute decided to, and it was a great thing that they did. They caught all these great band leaders while they were still alive, and they were bringing all the great bands on there, one band at a time, and they would have 1 week, Duke Ellington's band would come down and do a concert, and they would record it and put it in their archives, and then Basie's band and Buddy Rich's band, Woody Herman's band, and HAMP's band, and I don't know who else. But I remember being a little bugged that they filled in our day off. It was supposed to be our day off, and all of a sudden Bill Titone says, we put this date on your schedule. I'm thinking, what a bummer, look, because we were doing a lot of one-nighters, and I was looking forward to that night off. But that date that he filled in was the Smithsonian Institute, and I remember going down there with bummed out. But as it turned out to be one of the best gigs I've ever played, because we went down there and we did record, and of course I was featured on a couple of the things. It was still his small band, so there was a lot of blowing, and so my solos are in their archives down there somewhere. I've never heard them, but they tell me they're down there.
Yeah, that's got to be an honor to be archived there, I would think.
Yeah, I feel pretty privileged, really. As it turns out, I remember during the time, sometimes when you're in the middle of these things, they don't feel so good, and when you look back, it's like, wow, glad I did it.
Yeah, that's a good story. I want to play another audio clip, so listen in here. Now, Ron, that is from your John Lennon tribute, so let's talk about that.
Well, that's Norwegian Wood, and I'm playing soprano on that. And I kind of really, I'm listening to that as as you're playing it, and I added that little flute line in there, and I think the flute and soprano is such a pretty sound, Mm-hmm. So that's Mark Schwartz, by the way, playing flute, and he's a young monster on the scene today, and a former student of mine. He actually studied with me, and because he has his Eastman degree, and then he went on to get his master's, and he's out on the New York scene now, really making a lot of noise and playing really well. So that's Mark Schwartz. But regarding that album, that's an album that I dedicated to John Lennon. In 1974, I recorded with John on a project called Walls and Bridges, and he had a 5-horn section that he referred to as the Little Big Horns. And I was playing alto, and Steve Medeo was playing trumpet, and the jazz great tenor player Frank Vicari and Howard Johnson, another wonderful jazz player, played baritone and bass sax, and Bobby Keys played tenor. So there were 5 of us, and it was a pretty interesting date since there was no music.
I read that on your site, and I'm going, how did you I mean, I know you're all professionals, but how do you do that? Because it sounded like John Lennon just said, "Hey, play," and that's it.
That's it. That's what he did. That's pretty much the way it was. Well, Steve Medeo hired me for this gig, and Steve is a great friend of mine, and I know Steve for a lot of years, and we played in a lot of bands together before he got into the rock scene, and we both lived on Long Island. And Steve hired me for the gig, and that's a funny story too, because when he hired me for the gig, it was the strangest hiring that I've ever been involved with. He called me up and we were talking, and we talked for 10 minutes before he even mentioned the session. And then he said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And I said, "Well, I think I'm okay. What's going on?" He said, "Well, I got a little recording session." I don't even know if he said recording session. He said, "I got a session," and I wasn't sure if it was a jam session.
What kind of session, right?
What the heck kind of session was it? But it couldn't have been anything important because it was so far into the conversation, and it was so casual. And then we did, and that was. And I said okay, and then we kept talking. And then before we hung up, I asked him who was the session with, and he says, "Oh yeah, it's with John Lennon." So that's how that whole thing came about.
Yeah, I think that's a great story. So you guys basically had to do straight improv. How did you make that happen?
Well, for Steve it was par for the course. When he played with the rock bands, he toured with all those great bands. He toured with Stevie Wonder and Rolling Stones and Butterfield Blues Band and all those great rock bands. And they were all doing like head charts. They were making these things up on the spot, and maybe they had rehearsals. I don't know, but they didn't have music, and that's kind of the way this session was going to be run. But I didn't know it. If I had known, I probably would have told Steve, "No, get somebody else." First of all, it's a new genre for me. I'm not a rock player, and I'm not going to sit there and fake. Rock lines with 4 other horn players and make a fool out of myself. So I decided to, I took the gig not knowing, and when I got to the studio, it was too late to back out. So I asked Steve if I could take a peek at the book, meaning the music, and Steve looks at me with this funny look on his face, and he says, "No, there's no arrangements." I said, "Come on, man, let me see the book." I thought sure he's kidding. Stop being funny with me, Steve.
They just threw it together and said play, and you did. Now, where did you actually record? Did John Lennon had a home with a recording studio, or you went to a studio?
No, we were up at Record Plant, big studio in the city, great studio actually.
Okay.
And it was, so Steve saw that I was getting a little panicky, and I don't know about panicky, but a little uneasy. Let's put it that way. And he says, "Don't worry about it, Ron." He says, "Everything's cool." He says, "Just listen to me." He says, and it gets easier as you go. It's don't worry about being in a different genre, and don't worry about not having arrangements or everything being in the key of E and D and G and whatever, all those rock and roll keys. So it was a little bit uncomfortable. You know what? But it did get easier, and the panic kind of went away after the first session, and I started getting comfortable with the flow of stuff. And
so I got to jump in here because that leads me. You know, I did my research on you, Ron, and so I read quite a bit. When you worked with John Lennon, what did he mean when he asked if there were any secrets?
Well, secrets meant mistakes. You know, if he liked something, he would always check with us to make sure that it was musically okay. You know, maybe he didn't. Maybe he trusted arias more than his own or something. I don't know. Because I know he had tremendous respect for us. He was a great. By the way, he was a great guy to work with. He was fun to be around. He was so cool. He was very respectful. He was very sensitive and just one of the nicest leaders I've ever worked for. So it was that part was really cool, and that made the stress a little more bearable too. You know, so he would basically sit there and ask us if he liked what we played. He would say, "I like it." Any secrets? And if we said no, then he'd say, "Okay, that's a take."
Gotcha. Now he gave you something that was probably worth a lot of money, and it's sentimental. Do you want to share that story?
Yeah, well, as we mentioned, there were no arrangements, but he did have lead sheets, and I'm thinking like it's probably a good idea to take the lead sheets, make some copies for the guys, and that way at least we know what the hell key we're in, and we know a little bit about the song, where the melody is, and that kind of thing. So I went into another one of the rooms up at Record Plant, and I was photostatting the music so that everybody can have a copy of the lead sheet. And John comes walking in the room and takes the music out, and he sticks his face in the photostat machine and hits the button, and lit up the room. I mean, those lights. I'm thinking, what the heck is he doing?
He's photostatting his face.
He's gonna, yeah, but he's got. I mean, you can go blind doing that. So he still had his glasses on. He put his face on the plate there, and these two photostats come sliding out, and you can see his nose is a little flat from being on the thing, but his glasses are still on. And he hands one to me, and he hands one to Steve, and he says, "Here, hang on to these." He says, "Someday they're going to be worth a lot of money."
I'll bet. Do you still have it?
I do. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, for this project, what we did, my wife actually took that and we made copies of it, and we put them on T-shirts, you know, for the Lennon project, and we gave them away as gifts for the people who donated to the project because we were on this Kickstarter thing, you know.
Right. Now, I know that you're donating $1 for each CD sale going to aidforkids.org. So what does that organization provide for? Actually,
it's $2 for each CD, and it's for struggling kids worldwide. An amazing organization that we did a lot of research, and we interviewed a bunch of different charities, and these people are just doing a phenomenal job with helping kids worldwide. And 98% of all their donations goes directly to the kids. They have very little overhead because all their workers are volunteers, and we really like the idea that the money goes right to the kids. And it's aidforkids.org. If anybody wants to check out their site, it's an amazing group of people. In fact, we're going to be up there. They're based up in Maine. And we were just on the phone earlier today, and I'm not sure the date yet, but we're going to be doing a performance up there, you know, in Maine.
Now, let me ask you, how did you, for the CD, how did you select the songs? And maybe talk a little bit about the songs that you selected for the CD, for the John Lennon tribute.
It was a long process, Laurie. I have everything that they ever wrote. I bought all their music, and I sat here literally for months, because you know, most of these tunes weren't in my repertoire. You know, they're not the tunes that I would normally play. Some of them I had to learn, and I had to play them and get comfortable with them, and try them at different tempos, and try them at different time signatures, and different change of key, or put a different rhythm to it to see if I can make it fit into this style that I'm shooting for here. So it was a long. That was the hardest part of this whole project. That and the mixing, I guess, was not equally as hard. But picking the tunes for me was very, very strenuous. I mean, it was nice. It was fun at the same time. But but it was a long process, and I had so many choices to pick from, and narrowing it down to 12 was
difficult.
quite a challenge.
Yeah, I would say that's a big selection, and just trying to kind of pick a few to put on the CD. Now, I also want to talk, Ron. You've played at the Trumpets Jazz Club. Talk about that.
Well, yeah, for the past year and a half, I've been there with my big band. We do the last Sunday of each month. Enrico and Christina are the owners, and we've become, we were working the club. Angela and I were working with our small group, just rhythm section, and Angela and myself. And we got friendly with Enrico and Christine, the owners, and they would come over here. We'd have barbecues together. We socialized with them, and we would go to their club often and work there as well. And they were over here one time, and I was playing a demo of my big band that was done quite a few years ago, and they didn't know that I had all this music. They didn't know that I had a big band, all this Frank Foster and Neil Hefti stuff. But it was basically sitting there collecting dust because with the economy, and I just got tired of pushing the big band. It's just so hard to make any money. It's hard. It's a hard thing to sell. So, but they found out I had all this music, and we talked about it, and they kind of inspired me a little bit to put the band back together and go in there and try a Sunday night. So we've been doing that once a month, and it's been building, and it's been working real well. I have an amazing band. All the best players in New York, New Jersey are doing it, and it's just been a lot of fun. I'm having a ball, and I'm happy that they kind of gave me that push.
Trumpets Jazz Club is in Montclair, New Jersey?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. And then, for kind of a final question here, if there are aspiring musicians that are out there that are listening, what advice would you give them? And that's a big question, Ron.
Yeah, I think the best thing I can tell them is to first of all be able to separate the music business from music. Don't let the music business affect the music, because it's easy that can happen, and I've seen it happen to a lot of my friends. Always keep reminding yourself why you're playing. I didn't play the saxophone back in the 6th grade because I wanted to make $1 million. I picked up the saxophone because I wanted to play music, and you got to keep reminding yourself why you're playing music. If the business isn't going well, don't let that affect your playing. And the other thing I would suggest is that they create musical situations for themselves. Don't sit around and wait for the phone to ring. I do this all the time. For years, I have musicians come down here to my studio, and we play, and we just play music. We compose new music, and it's artsy fartsy kind of get together, and we don't have the distractions of how many people are showing up and is the club owner bugged. We just play and we have a good time, and we expand our music, and we stretch, and I think young players need to do more of that. Don't come out of school and think you're gonna get out there and start doing shows and working and blah blah blah. It's nice to try. Nothing wrong with trying, but don't forget to play. Don't forget to keep playing music and have situations that's pure art and it's designed just to help you stretch as a player.
Right. And now, last thing, we're going to go in just a second here, but your CD is also up for a Grammy. I want to mention that. So if somebody wants to purchase your CD or they want to contact you, Ron, how do they do that?
Okay, well, there's two places. We're on CD Baby, and they can go to my website. It's ronaprea.com.
All right, very good. At APREA, APREA.
.com, yeah. So there's two different places where they can buy the album.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I want to thank all my listeners for listening to The World of Laurie Zoock. And, Ron, we're going to go out with some of your music.
Sounds good, Laurie. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Arg, matey. When it's time for lunch, when it's time for dinner, when the show's over, when the day's over, when it's time to chill, where do we go? Over to Naughty Nancy's Food Shack and Crow's Nest Pub. It's literally in our backyard, right in back of the WTAN studios at 700 Eldridge Street, just north of downtown Clearwater. Just look for the broadcast tower. Nancy's food and atmosphere get rave reviews. The laid-back patio is a great place to hang out, dine, and listen to live music at night. And Nancy's one of the friendliest proprietors in town. And now, Nancy is serving Sunday Jazz Brunch from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Brunch served with Eggs Benedict, crepes, waffles, lox and bagels, shrimp, oysters, and a build-your-own omelet. That's all at Naughty Nancy's Food Shack and Crow's Nest Pub, 700 Eldridge Street in Clearwater. That's right where Eldridge crosses the Pinellas Trail between Myrtle and Fort Harrison. Call 446-3717. 446-3717.
Did you know there's a sprawling botanical paradise right in your own backyard? Come visit Sunken Gardens. Located at 1825 4th Street North, it's St. Petersburg's oldest living museum. This 100-year-old garden is home to some of the oldest tropical plants in the region. Unwind as you stroll through meandering paths, lush with exotic plants from around the world. Explore cascading waterfalls, beautiful demonstration gardens, and more than 50,000 tropical plants and flowers. Sunken Gardens provides garden tours, horticultural programs, special events, field trips, weddings, private or corporate rentals, and much more. Call 727-551-3102 for more information. That's 727-551-3102. Sunken Gardens, 1825 4th Street North, right in the heart of Old Northeast St. Petersburg. Call 727-551-3102.
Imus in the morning.
Here is Eddie Murphy. Hi, Eddie.
Forbes magazine said I'm the most overpaid actor. Get out of here. I played 6 parts of The Nutty Professor. Just think how much money the producers would have spent if they paid me 6 times. In Nutty Professor 2, I played 6 parts again. That's 12 parts for 2 movies. 12! I tell you who's overpaid. How about Jack Black? His last name is Black, but his movie's all in red. Kristen Stewart, they gave her $30 million to look into the camera with that blank stare and take long pauses between her lines. You know why she plays a vampire? Because she's sucking all of Hollywood dry. You think I don't know what this is all about? It's because I'm black. They should have called the article Eddie Murphy is sitting on top of the world in Beverly Hills, but I guess they decided to call it Murphy Sucks because it didn't want to do Beverly Hills Cop 5. Somebody's still mad from bankrolling Pluto Nash. What was I supposed to do? Somebody said, hey man, here's $20 million for this piece of crap. I said, Brandy, Monty, this is my lucky day. This is my lucky day. And I cashed a check, which got me on Forbes' other list, the richest black celebrities.
Catch Imus in the morning right here on the stations of the Tan Talk Network.